Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're talking about something huge, a massive shift in global power. We're seeing giant tech companies start to act, well, a lot like countries. And governments, they're scrambling, trying to figure out how to even talk to them.
All right, let's get right into it with this idea of the new ambassadors. So picture this, it's 2017, and Denmark does something that sounds like it's straight out of science fiction. They appoint the world's first ever tech ambassador. But here's the twist. This ambassador wasn't sent to France or Germany. Nope, they were sent to Silicon Valley.
And you know what's so striking about this quote is just how blunt it is. The Danish foreign minister basically came right out and said it. Look, companies like Google, Meta, and Microsoft now have so much influence over our societies, they're acting like countries. They admitted that old-school diplomacy just wasn't built for this new reality.
And Denmark, well, they were just the trailblazers. It was like the first domino in a long line. Since they did that, you've had over 70 other countries jump on board, all trying to set up their own version of tech diplomacy. Everyone's trying to figure out how to deal with these new power brokers.
But this whole thing, it leads to a really thorny question, right? Think about it. What's the point of sending an ambassador if you have no leverage? No treaties, no international law, no real way to make the other side do anything. And that's the core problem we're going to unpack today. So this brings us to what's being called a third wave of power. To really get why a country would send a diplomat to a company, you kind of have to step back and look at the history of diplomacy. The source material breaks it down into three big waves. Okay, so the first wave, way back in 1815, that was simple. It was just country-to-country diplomacy. Then after World War II, we get the second wave, these big multinational groups like the UN and the World Bank. But this third wave we're in now, it's a whole different beast. There was no big treaty, no formal ceremony. It just happened. It grew organically because tech companies got so unbelievably powerful. And when I say powerful, the scale is just mind-blowing. Just look at this. Microsoft's market cap isn't just big, it's bigger than the entire GDP of most nations on the planet. We're talking more economic might than a country like Canada. It's wild.
And it's not just about the cash either. Let's talk about population. Meta, Facebook, Instagram, its user base is so huge. It's basically the size of China. These platforms aren't just selling ads anymore. They are literally shaping how billions of us think and talk to each other every single day.
Okay, so they have money and they have people. But how does that power actually work in the real world? Well, a huge part of the answer lies in something physical, data centers. And this is where things get really interesting. I mean, just try to wrap your head around this number. The 5 biggest cloud companies, people call them the hyperscalers, they're on track to spend $600 billion on infrastructure in 2026. In a single year. That's an incredible amount of physical stuff being built all over the world. And here's why that matters. These aren't just boring business announcements. When a company like Amazon Web Services drops over $5 billion in Saudi Arabia, or Oracle commits $14 billion, that's a strategic move. It's basically a geopolitical statement. It's saying we're digitally aligned, and it locks that country into a particular tech ecosystem for decades.
So what you're seeing is a new kind of global chess match. But instead of armies, the pieces are data centers. On one side, you've got the US hyperscalers. They're commercial, but they bring their own rules and values with them wherever they go. And on the other side, you've got the Chinese cloud providers, which are straight-up instruments of the state, pushing things like the digital Silk Road.
If you want a crystal clear example of this new kind of power, look no further than what happened with Starlink in Ukraine. You had one man, a private citizen, Elon Musk, who made a decision, his decision, to limit the satellite service, and that one decision directly affected a country's military operations during a war. Think about that. A sovereign army's capability was decided by one guy with 0 treaties, 0 courts, 0 protocols to stop him.
Right. And that Starlink example, it brings us perfectly to the absolute heart of the problem, which the source material calls the accountability vacuum. And this is really the key idea to grasp. In the past, when you had a super powerful company like, say, the East India Company, governments eventually stepped in. They regulated it, they nationalized it, they brought it to heel. But today's tech giants, they exist in this weird new space where all those old tools, they just don't work anymore. And this vacuum isn't just one thing. It's got 3 different parts. First, there's the jurisdictional problem. Like, whose laws even apply when you have servers in Ireland, users in Indonesia, and an HQ in California? It's a mess. Second, there's the representational problem.
Sure, these companies can show up at global summits, but their promises are totally voluntary. They can just walk away. And finally, the temporal problem, which is just that tech moves at lightning speed while governments and laws move at a snail's pace. The rules are always out of date.
So, okay, the old way of doing things is clearly broken. The big question is, what's next? What would a new system, a new diplomatic architecture even look like?
Well, the thinking goes that we need to attack those three gaps we just talked about. First, for representation, we need to give these companies real, binding obligations, not just polite invitations to the table. For jurisdiction, we need countries to agree on some basic ground rules that work everywhere. And for the time gap, we've got to get proactive. Make rules for technology before it takes over the world, not after.
But let's be real for a second about where we are right now. This quote just nails it, doesn't it? Sending an ambassador to a company you can't actually control, that's a gesture. It's not a strategy. Without any real teeth to enforce the rules, it's basically just window dressing.
And all of this leads to the toughest question, the one that's really at the heart of it all. When governments depend on these companies for their country's core infrastructure, for investment, for their entire innovation economy, who really holds the power? That's the deep structural problem. And honestly, no one has a good answer for it yet. It leaves you wondering, in this new world order, who's actually in charge?